All right, today we're concluding the Powerful Relationship series, and I'll give a real quick recap for those of you who weren't here. I recommend, not just because I think they're good, but I think they're good for you, to go back and catch the first three if you didn't. We got a podcast and a YouTube channel, all that stuff, if you want to check it out. Week one, I talked about what it means to be powerful people, that powerful people have control of themselves. Week two, I talked about love and fear and the battle that happens inside of us between love and fear, and that we have to be careful not to let fear drive our relationships, because perfect love casts out fear. But the opposite of that is also true, that fear casts out love in our relationships. And then last week, I taught you that vulnerability is necessary in your relationships, and that trust is vital if you're going to live and walk in vulnerability. And so we start every week with Galatians chapter 5, the fruit of the Spirit, verse 22. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance or patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. And so today I want to talk about how if we're self-controlled people, that's the part of the fruit of the Spirit we don't like to talk about. Everybody wants, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness. And then we just kind of like self-control. Like we do that thing with self-control. Like we don't like that part of it because it requires something from us. But if we're going to walk as self-controlled people who've decided to keep our love on and be vulnerable, how do we regulate ourselves when we relate with people? Because there's a part of that could sound like, well, you should just let people like run all over you. You got to keep your love on. No, there's a way that we can operate in relationship. Jesus is our example. We're going to look at some times that Jesus set some boundaries with people today. And so, side note, there's a big part of, we're kind of using Danny Silk's Keep Your Love On as the framework for this series. Not kind of, we're for real using that. So on Wednesday nights, we got 5 weeks left on Wednesday nights where we're going through a much deeper dive into this. And so we're not going to get into in this series like conflict and how to walk through conflict. And forgiveness is a big part of walking with Keep Your Love On. And so those are topics that we'll cover on Wednesday night. We didn't just have time to fit it into a 4-week series. So if you want more of this, we're doing it on Wednesday nights up here at the church. So don't miss that. So this is the most practical of all the messages in the series. Today, I hope that you leave with some tools that you can start using today that will help you in your relationships. This is the how-to message. So we had 3 weeks of kind of setting it up. Today is, all right, so what do I do with that? So the title of the message today is Protect What's Important. Protect what is important. I'll pray for us. Lord, help us protect what's most important. Amen. All right. So today we're talking about setting limits or boundaries. I'm going to get into what I mean by boundaries in the second point, so just bear with me for just a second as we get started. Point number one is the friend zones. And I'm not talking about what happens when the pretty girl introduces you as her friend. I'm talking about what Danny Silk calls levels of intimacy. So I don't know if you've ever thought about it, but not everyone should have the same level of access to you. Yeah, right. Powerful people control themselves, and that includes who you interact with and how you interact with them. And so Jesus is our example of that. Jesus' most intimate, closest relationship was with the Father. He said, I only do what I see my Father doing. I and the Father are one. And then he had his 12 disciples. And then within the 12 disciples, he had the 3 amigos. Not Lucky, Dusty, and Ned. Peter, James, and John were his 3 best friends on the earth. And then of those 3, we know that John was his best friend. John, the guy who wrote the book of John. That was Jesus' best friend. I'll prove it to you. Matthew chapter 17, verse 1 and 2. After 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, the brother of James, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. There he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. He didn't take all 12 disciples to the transfiguration. He only took Peter, James, and John. John chapter 13, verse 23, and it's a little self-serving that John is writing this, but, he says, one of them, the disciple whom Jesus loved, that's only in the book of John. John refers to himself as the disciple that Jesus loved. It was true, but it's amusing. But if you ever look at like the painting of the Last Supper, the one laying across Jesus' chest, that's John. So it says, one of them, the disciple whom Jesus loved, was reclining next to him. John chapter 19, verse 25, near the cross of Jesus stood his mother, his sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother there, and this is John writing again, and the disciple whom he loved, he refers himself in the third person, he could just say, and me. He said, and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to her, woman, don't say that to your mom, here is your son. And to the disciple, here is your mother. From that time on, this disciple took her into his home. So right before Jesus died, he looked at his best friend and said, take care of my mom. He didn't ask Peter or James or Matthias or Thomas or any of the other 12. He looked at his best friend and said, I'm about to die. Take care of my mom. And so Jesus teaches us this idea of the 12, the 3, and the 1. And I don't think it's like a formula. Some people would say that it is. I don't think you need to like pick out 12 people and then 3 and then 1. But it's a general rule that says as the closer someone gets to your core, the fewer there should be. We have limited resources. So I'm going to say the word resources a lot today. And anytime I say resources, I'm talking about your time, your energy, your attention, and even your physical resources. All of those are limited. We have limited time. We have limited energy. We have limited attention, especially if you're like me and you're ADHD to the max. Like I got about a 15-second attention span on a good day. And then we have limited financial resource. We have limited stuff. There's only so much that one person can do. Some of us have more than others, but as a general rule, we're all limited in some capacity. And so I think that there's 5 levels of relationship. There's certainly a gradient within that, but I think there's 5 kind of general levels of intimacy. Number 1, at your most core, that's the God spot. Only God should be there, nothing else. It's the first commandment. I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me. Like, that's the center. And then if you move out a level, if you're married, it should be your spouse. So it should be God, then your spouse. If you're not married, your best friend kind of fits in that category, whoever your closest friend is. And then when you get married, you have to do something that's a little bit uncomfortable, and you have to take that person and move them out a level. That's perfectly normal and natural to do. A lot of people have conflict in their life because they never did that. Then the next level is your kids, your grandkids, and your closest friends. So anyone who, your family and your closest friends. And then the next level out from that, you've got all your other people that you know, your other friends and people that you're acquaintances with. And then in level 5 is like the rest of the world. And so, like I said, there's a gradient to that. You don't need to be like, you're a level 3 friend. Like, you don't have to do all of that. But as you get closer to the center, you don't have enough resource to be everything to everyone. You just don't. And so we have to prioritize the connections that are our closest and provide and allocate our time, energy, and attention commensurate to where people lie in those levels. Does that make sense? So you and I have control over who gets to be at what level of intimacy with us. You don't have to let someone into level 2 just because they're your mom or your dad. Amen. If you're an adult. Maybe 3. They probably shouldn't be in level 2. That'd be kind of weird if you're married. But that also yeah, that does. Yeah. I'm just going to leave that alone. I was going to, but I'm not. All right, so you're not obligated to promote anyone to a level they're not capable of owning the responsibility of. Did y'all catch that? So if someone isn't capable of contributing at a level 3 relationship, you don't have to keep them at that level. You have control over what level you connect with people at. How close you're willing to let them get to you. All right, so that's the friend zones, 5 of them, give or take a few. All right, point number 2, boundaries protect what's inside. Profound preaching, I know. So the definition of, this is silly, you're gonna laugh, but the definition of the word boundary is a line that marks the limits of an area, right? That's, if we look up in the dictionary, that's what a boundary is. I like Henry Cloud has a book called Boundaries. He's got a couple of one Boundaries in Marriage. He's several, but he's kind of the most well-renowned person on boundaries. And I would encourage you, if you've never read through that or watched any of his videos, check out Henry Cloud. He says this. He says, boundaries define us. They define what is me and what is not me. A boundary shows me where I end and someone else begins, leading me to a sense of ownership. I'm in control of me. Knowing what I am to own and take responsibility for gives me freedom. So I'm not bound by all the other junk I'm not responsible for. Taking responsibility for my life opens up many different options. Boundaries help us keep the good in and the bad out. Setting boundaries inevitably involves taking responsibility for your choices. You are the one who makes them. You are the one who must live with their consequences, and you are the one who may be keeping yourself from making the choices that you could be happy with. That's tough, right? Sometimes. We must own our thoughts and clarify distorted thinking. For our purposes, when I say the word boundary, this is what I mean. A boundary is a decision that I make on how I will manage myself in relationship with other people. So I'll say it again. A boundary is a decision that I make on how I will manage me in relationship to you. Has nothing to do with you. Things you do might impact how I manage myself, but I don't control you. I only control me. It includes what level of access someone has to me. Yeah. I have control of that. Just because someone knocks on your door, you don't have to let them come inside your house. It includes how much access they have to my resources. Ashley's got a debit card with my name on, her name on it, but she's got a debit card connected to our bank account. No one else in this room has a debit card to my bank account. And I reserve the right to adjust the limit or boundary based on their behavior. We've turned off Amazon once or twice in our house. When the pandemic started, y'all, Ashley was part of this group on Facebook where everyone was like buying stuff for each other and like, yes, I was on it too. Yeah, we were really blessing some people, y'all. It's like we got to dial back the blessing just a little bit because we're about to be broke. But boundaries are important. And in the Bible, I think one of the best examples is Nehemiah. Nehemiah chapter 1, verse 3 and 4. They said, so these people come to Nehemiah and they say to him, Those who survived the exile, so Israel had been in Babylon and they had come back to Israel after 70 years. Those who survived the exile and are back in Jerusalem are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down and its gates have been burned with fire. When I heard these things, I sat down and wept. For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. See, Nehemiah knew something, especially in the ancient world. The boundary of a nation or a city was, we really have like these little nation states. And so the boundary of a province, the boundary of a city or a nation was a city's identity. And he knew that no one, like if you're like Assyria or Babylon, one of these other nations that are outside looking, if you saw a nation that didn't have a fortified boundary, they were ripe for the taking. They couldn't defend themselves. They didn't have, so a boundary represented their like national identity. Boundaries are important. They still are. I won't get into that today. But just like Israel, any other nation or person or thing needs to have boundaries. Like Henry Cloud said, it defines where I end and you begin. How many times do we have problems because that's a blurry line sometimes? I feel obligated to do something that I'm actually not obligated to do. And the level of intimacy that someone exists at, what friend zone they live at, determines the level of the boundary needed. So for your spouse, it's time to build that castle with the moat with alligators and sharks with laser beams on their head I talked about last week. So I tend to work a lot. If you know me, you know this. I can be a workaholic real fast. And occasionally Ashley will tell me about that. And when she does, almost always, I lock down the fort. If she comes to me and says, like, babe, this is out of control, like, I need some time with you, like, I'll just tell everybody else, like, sorry, can't, busy. Like, I raised the drawbridge and stopped feeding the sharks, so they're ready for people to come, you know what I'm saying? But boundaries are us saying yes to something, which necessarily means that you have to say no to something else. So when I say yes to Ashley, I'm saying no to you. When I say yes to a meeting, I'm saying no to spending time with Ashley or doing whatever else I might want to do or need to do. And there's times when that's okay. There are times when it's okay to say yes to things, but you have to protect what's most important. So I like to think about like a castle. So in a castle, you've got a king, maybe a queen, but we'll use a king for our purposes. You have a king who lives inside the castle. He's the king of the land. And the queen has access just about anywhere in the castle. She can go in the king's bedroom. It's her bedroom too. She has access anywhere she wants to go. And then you have kids and other relatives that might live there, and they may have their own room in the castle. They may have the ability to come and go as they please and come stay and do all of that. And you may provide for them, things like that, right? But they don't have access to your bedroom. If they do, and they're over the age of like 3, you should draw a boundary. And then acquaintances or other people that you know, they might get to come visit if they let you know they're coming, or if you have a big event and you invite them over, but they can't just like show up and walk in anytime they want. Like your house should be the same way. Like it used to be a time when you could just show up at somebody's house. Now you might get shot if you did that. And then potentially hostile people aren't welcome in at all. They don't get to come inside the castle at all. If there's any threat to the king or his family, they just don't allow them in. Not without like some armed knights or something. And so regulating your life and who has access at what level of intimacy is a powerful person's response. It says, I'm in control of me, I'm in control of who has access to me, and I'm going to determine what level of me you get to have access to. Nobody but me gets to make that decision. And nobody but you gets to make that decision for you. The first time we see boundaries introduced in the Bible is in Genesis chapter 2. We'll just read verse 15. The Lord took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. And the Lord God commanded the man, there's two commands here. One, you are free to eat from any tree in the garden. You have access to the entire thing. He was like the queen. He had access to the entire castle. Except for one thing. It said, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it, you will certainly die. God had given Adam dominion over the garden. It was Adam's responsibility to work the garden, to take care of the plants, to water them, to take care of the animals. He named all the animals. There's this weird story about how he was trying to find a suitable helper, and like none of the animals made sense, so God made a woman. It's kind of a weird story, but God put Adam in the garden and gave him dominion over the entire garden. And then the serpent comes in and deceives Eve. The reason Adam's the one who's responsible is because he was the one. Eve, when God says this to Adam, Eve hasn't been made yet. God gave Adam dominion over the garden and said, you're powerful to have dominion over this place and take care of it and not touch that tree. So I've said before, the first command from the Lord was a command of freedom. You can have anything in the garden you want. The second was a command of protection. Don't eat that or you'll die. Don't touch the stove or it'll burn you. And when the serpent comes in, Adam should have killed it or thrown it out of the garden. He let the serpent in, he let the serpent talk to his wife, and then he let his wife be deceived. She wasn't there when God said, don't touch that. But Adam came in, or the serpent came in and said, did God really say? Well, she didn't know. She wasn't there. And then the Bible says she came back and told Adam, and then they both looked at it and were like, yeah, that does look like we could eat that and be all right. But the boundary was put in place to protect them. Powerless people let anyone in and everyone in. And then they wonder why their life's a mess. No one wins when you choose to be powerless against your problems. You only create more problems. You destroy your relationships. You refuse to take responsibility, confront issues, and set limits. No one wins in that scenario. You don't win, and neither does the other person. It might look like somebody wins, but they don't. We have to accept that the world is full of scary, crazy, bad things, bad people, and then set limits and boundaries to protect ourselves against those things. So we use limits or boundaries to protect what's most important. What's most important is my heart, my resources, my energy, time, attention, physical resources, and my relationships and connections. Those are the things that are most important. My job, like I've said, is to manage me, and it's no one's job but mine to protect my own heart. I know you know this, Proverbs 4:23. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. If you don't protect your heart, everything's in trouble. So the psalmist instructs, this is not psalmist, this is Solomon. I don't know why I wrote the psalmist in my notes, but Proverbs is Solomon. So Solomon tells us to guard our heart. And so, yes, we should be vulnerable. But I told you last week that you have to be careful who you're vulnerable with. Vulnerability requires trust. Castles have drawbridges and gates and doors for a reason. You can let them down and let somebody in who's safe, and then you close it back up. And the more access you give somebody, the more trust is required. That's why the closer someone is to you, if you get hurt by that person, the harder it is to heal. Because the closer someone is, the more access to your heart they have. And the world, the flesh, and the devil all want to attack your relationships and your heart. And limits and boundaries help us protect those valuable connections. So this is where the disclaimer comes in, that we have to be a little bit careful with boundaries, because we can just turn into like ninjas who like block everything and don't let anybody in. And so I don't know, it just happened that this is just a 90s movie series. And so as I was thinking about this, I thought about Beauty and the Beast. Yeah. 1990, it's barely 90s, 1991, but barely in the 90s. We made it into the 80s with the Three Amigos reference earlier, so. But Beast doesn't want anyone to see what he's become. And so he hides in his castle. And then he sees like Belle, she like kind of stumbles her way in, and he's like, oh, look at her. And what's that?
So mean. He is very mean.
And so he controls and manipulates her while she's there, trying to have a relationship with her, but doesn't work. Eventually, she like runs off. What's the other dude's name? Gaston. I wanted to call him, I think the name from, I was thinking the one from Les Miserables. I almost said the wrong name. But she runs off to Gaston, and that doesn't work out. And then she comes back, and eventually, did I mess up how that goes?
Oh, yeah. Yes, she did not run off to Gaston. She ran off because her dad was in prison.
Oh, that's because Gaston lied about it, didn't he?
But she didn't run to Gaston.
Well,
she doesn't like him.
Whatever. There you go. Gaston wasn't in the notes. I just kind of went with that rabbit trail.
Sorry, it's my favorite movie.
It's all good.
Right.
The main point is that Beast is hiding in his castle, and it's not until he becomes vulnerable that he is able to have a real connection with Belle. Y'all with me now? Sorry, I should have watched the movie when I thought of this yesterday to add it to my notes. Yeah, I just need to skip the whole middle of the movie. It's been a while since I've seen it. We need to cut this part out of the podcast, I think. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, this is going to be the clip we put on Facebook. But ultimately, it's love that drives out the fear in their relationship. When Beast is able to become vulnerable, that's what drives out the fear in their relationship. And so we have to be careful not to build a fortress of solitude. You're welcome, Ed. Y'all, if y'all know, he's got Superman tattoo. And hide from everyone in our fear. We have to be careful not to do that. And self-protection causes problems, but so does not taking care of what's inside the castle. It's equally important to make sure that I'm emotionally healthy, that I've done the work to clean up the inside of the castle and not just make it look like, because you can take an old rundown castle and close up the drawbridges, and from the outside it looks like you got your life together. But if someone comes in and sees all the cobwebs and the dirty rooms you don't have access to and all the mess that's inside, that's just as bad, if not worse, than just letting everyone see. control your mess, but you need to do the work to clean up what's on the inside. Taking care of yourself demonstrates that you have some self-respect. When people see that you can take care of yourself and can see and taste the good fruit that your life produces, you begin to build a culture of honor, freedom, and respect around you. If you wonder why things around you look the way they do, what are you giving out to other people? What kind of food are you feeding them? It's kind of like fishing. It's like the lure you use will attract the fish that you want to catch. You don't go bass fishing with a spoon. Striper fishing, you use spoons. But the words and actions that you live by and that you model should demonstrate that they recognize your value and you recognize their value. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. What comes out demonstrates what's inside. If people don't recognize your value or demonstrate respect towards you, then you know that you can't be in relationship with them. The only people that you should want to connect yourself to are the people who value and respect your life and their own. Amen. If they respect your life, then you can start to develop trust with them and that sort of thing. But if they don't respect themselves, then they're going to become one of those responses we talked about last week. They're going to be the goat or the T-Rex or the chocolate dragon. And we want to be careful with those three. I was thinking, like, you can't have a real relationship with a vampire, no matter how nice they are. Some of them are real charming. I've watched some vampire movies in my day. That's a tactic they use to get close to you. Then they. So whether they're sweet and charming or they're just outwardly aggressive, both of those are bad. And they have to watch out for boundary erosion. This will happen slowly over time with things like, oh, hey, this won't take me just a second. Can you drop what you're doing and help me real quick? No, I told you I'm spending time with my wife today. I can't do that today. I'll do it tomorrow. I find myself doing that all the time. I have to be careful of that. I only need 5 minutes, but I need it right now. Well, don't take this the wrong way, but I'm going to decide where my attention goes. This might sound silly, but if you call me and your number is not saved in my phone, there's a 100% chance you're talking to my voicemail before you talk to me. 100%. Yep. Evidently Patrick too. Then I'll listen to your message and I'll decide if I need to call you back or not. Yeah. Just because I have a phone and you can Google and find my phone number doesn't mean you have access to me. I control who I talk to. I don't take meetings without a topic or an agenda. If you ask me to go have lunch, my next question is be like, cool, what do you want to talk about? And if we get there and you blindside me, I'm going to stand up and leave. I'll pay my bill. But I don't do blindsides. I also don't like to do that to other people. If I want to meet with you, you'll know why I want to meet with you before I meet with you. I set guidelines for hard discussions. If you've ever had a hard discussion with me, you know that I will outline, this is how this is going to go. If you want me to be involved in this, this is what I'm willing to do, this is what I'm not willing to do. And then if we go outside those guidelines, like, sorry, we agreed to this before we met. But I do those things because I've seen boundaries erode before. I know what happens if I don't. And so there are non-negotiables if you want my time and attention. I don't do it to be a jerk. I do it to protect my heart. I do it to protect our relationship. If you want to have a hard discussion with me, I'm totally cool having a hard discussion. Nobody likes them, but I at least want to know I'm walking in so I can prepare myself for a hard discussion. And if I'm going to have a hard discussion with you, I owe you the same respect to say, hey, this happened. We need to talk about it. Are you free on this date to talk about it? I'm not going to talk about it before then. We'll talk about it at this time. But that's just a respect that I give people. I've said it a couple of times. We have limited resources. A couple of years ago, if you had asked anyone, hey, how are you doing? Like before the pandemic, the response was almost always, well, I'm just tired. I've noticed over the last couple of years, it's kind of shifted. And now the response I hear from almost everyone I ask that question to, y'all know what it is? I'm just so busy. Everybody's busy these days. And maybe we are, maybe we aren't. That's a different discussion. But the point is, there's only so much of us to go around, and we have so much going on, most of us, all of us, I think, that we find ourselves just feeling overwhelmed by it, and then just one more thing needs our attention, like we feel like we're going to snap. And we get that way because we don't set healthy boundaries with work, with friends, with other people. And so healthy boundaries help us stay in control of those resources and manage them towards our priorities. So I only have so much time, so much energy, so much attention, and there's things in my life, like if something comes up at the church, I'm much more apt to do that than to go help somebody I don't know, because this is a higher priority for me. This has happened at the church where there's been things that have been like urgent that needed to get taken care of, but I had committed to spend time with Ashley, and I had to reach out and say, hey, Dane, can you handle this for me? Like, I can't do this right now. I have to take care of this. Like the level that something is in your life of intimacy dictates how you should prioritize your time, attention, and other resources towards it. For example, if somebody loses their job, if it's somebody that I don't know that just messages the church on Facebook, says, I just lost my job, really going through it, like I will absolutely pray for them and offer them my condolences and, pray that God will provide for you, that sort of thing. If I know you and you're one of my friends, I might say, hey, I actually heard of this company that I know that's hiring. Let me connect you with that person and see if they can help you get a job. If you're my best friend or someone that I'm closer to, I might say, can I buy you some groceries or put some gas in your car? If you need to come stay at my house for a little while, you can do that. What do you need? And if it's someone that's really close, like Ashley, or if we have kids one day, or like my nieces, if any of them ever need anything, they have access to all my resources, including my cheese sticks. And sometimes I got to get reprimanded for getting upset about that. It's okay. I'm not saying that there aren't times that we don't need help. We do. But if someone over the age of 18 never contributes anything to your relationship or communicates any value that they value you in their relationship, you need to move them down a few levels. Yeah. And don't let them keep sucking the life out of you. Amen. All right, point number 3, how to set boundaries. How do we do it? So we have to be careful, because if we violate someone's boundaries or let someone else violate our own, we can end up in a position we don't want to be in. So hold on that picture for just a second, Jeff. Don't put it up yet. I'll tell you when. So the other day I had a tree trimming contractor come over to the house, And we had some like rose bushes that were like old and dead, pulled out of the backyard, some tree limbs cut, stuff like that. So he texted me, hey, I'm on the way. I'll be there in a minute. And I said, great, I'll meet you out front. Call me when you get here. So it took him a little longer to get there than he had planned on. And when he showed up, he knocked on the front door. And if you know my dogs, they just go absolutely bonkers when someone knocks on the front door, like, rah, 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 like. And so I come out of my office into the living room, and Daisy, our bigger dog, is at the front door barking. And I'm like, where is Maggie? And I just hear, and I was like, where is she? Usually that means that she was like in our bedroom when I came out and like we closed the gate and she got stuck in there, which is totally cool with her because she'll just get up underneath the covers and like sleep all day. And so I walk over and I look and she's not standing at the gate in our bedroom. And I'm like, I don't know where she is. Then I realized where she was. So I open the door and tell the contractor, hey, give me a second. I'll tell you what happened in just a minute. You're going to laugh. This is so stupid. I'll be right back. You want to put it up, Jeff? So we have this cat litter box cover that the cats have to jump up into that hole, onto that platform, and then jump down into the litter, do their thing, and then they can jump back out and get out of the cat box. Maggie decided that she wanted to go get her some kitty snacks. And so she got up into the litter box and then found herself trapped inside. And she needed my help to get out of that situation. So I filmed a little video to make fun of her, to have forever. And then I opened it up and let her out. But what was intended to be a safe place for the cats to go do their business and keep the dogs away from the kitty snacks, because you don't want them to eat kitty snacks, them come give you a kiss. And they will. I don't know what is in cat poop to make them think it's the best thing, but it's like caviar for dogs. They love it. Yeah, they love it. You eat frozen hot dogs. I don't want to hear it. That's like the same thing.
Yes, I do.
So, if we're not careful, we'll find ourselves in a position like this, where we've crossed a boundary and we end up in a worse spot than where we wanted to be to begin with. You might get the kitty snack, but then you're going to find yourself trapped. The chocolate dragons are especially dangerous with this. They'll make it look like it's attractive and safe, but then when you get too far in, you got to be careful about who you get close to. All right, so we're about to go through some real practical steps. You already got it, cool. On how to set limits, but just be aware that every good thing has a shadow side. So if the light is pointed at is it too shiny for you today, Phil, or am I good?
You're good.
Okay. Phil told me I was blinding him the other day, and I got a fear. Y'all are so lovingly and nice to me. Yeah. But when the light shines on this side, there was a shadow behind me. So every good thing has a shadow. And if we aren't careful, healthy boundaries can get twisted into manipulation, control, isolation. That's also not good. You got to be careful with that too. So guard your heart. Be careful about who you let inside the deepest parts of you. So our best example of boundaries, I think, is Jesus. And this is one of my, favorite. It's a funny story. And so Matthew chapter 16, verse 21. From that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders. Leave that alone. And the chief priests and the teachers of the law. And that he must be killed on the third day and raised to life. Peter, y'all, if you know anything about Peter took Jesus aside and began to rebuke. You should never rebuke Jesus. So Peter pulls Jesus aside and says, "Never, Lord, this shall never happen to you." Peter turned and looked at him and said, "Get behind me, Satan." Jesus said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan." Did I get too excited? So Jesus said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." He was saying, you're worried about me not being here anymore, and you don't have any clue what I'm doing. Jesus was threatening the connection that Peter was threatening Jesus' connection with the Father. Jesus had a mission given to him by the Father, and Peter was coming to him saying, "You're not going to do that." And Jesus was saying to Peter, "You don't even know what you're saying right now. You don't know what the Father and I have talked about. You don't know what goes on behind closed doors with me and the Father. You don't know what I'm really doing here. You think you see the puzzle, but all you see is a tiny piece of this much bigger puzzle. You don't even know what you're talking about. Get behind me, Satan." Because Satan is who really opposed. Peter didn't really oppose what Jesus was doing, but Satan did. And Satan was influencing Peter he wanted Jesus to not do what he had come to do. And so Peter got a boundary drawn right between him and Jesus and said, "Get behind me, Satan, until you knock it off and quit acting like that." So I'm not telling you, like, go tell all your friends, "Get behind me, Satan," when they oppose what you feel like the Lord has told you to do. You're not Jesus. Don't do that. But I am telling you that you need to guard your priorities. First, you might need to develop your priorities and write them down. Like, if you don't know what's most important in your life, you should take some time and outline, what are the things that are my priorities? What are the things that are really important to me? And then guard against anything that comes against them. And the closer a relationship gets to your heart, the more opportunity and capability it has to compete with your priorities. Because it's important. And so how do we set healthy limits or boundaries? Number one, we learn to require respect in our relationships. If you don't respect me, we can't be friends. First, we have to learn to respect ourselves. That's, you matter, but so do I. Then we have to learn to respect others. That's the you matter part. And then we have to require respect in our relationship. It's okay to require someone to respect you. Number two, tell others who you are going to be and what you're going to do. I don't get to tell you what you're going to do. I can ask you to do something. I can tell you something's important to me and I would really like it if you did this, but I can't make you do anything. So instead of telling someone else who they are and what they need to do, I'm going to tell you who I am and what I'm going to do. If you keep doing this, this is the boundary I'm going to put in place. If you disrespect me again, you're not going to be welcome in these meetings anymore. If you talk to my wife like that again, we're no longer friends. I'm not going to help you move. I'm not. I'll give you money to help pay for the movers. You can't use my truck either. Saturdays are my day off. Not really, but like that, some people, that's their day off. I'm going to spend this evening with my wife, so I'm not working tonight. Learn to tell people what you're going to do, who you're going to be. Number 3, say what you mean and do it. Like, I've seen parents like, if you don't do that, I'm going to whip your butt. I'm going to count to 3. 1, 2, 3, 7, 8. I mean it. I'm really going to whip your butt. 14, 15. They're like, yeah, okay, whatever. I shared this story a couple weeks ago, but it really is the best example in my life. I had a boss many years ago that called me and yelled at me on the phone. And I called him back and said, hey, homie, don't play that. You're not going to yell at me. If I messed up, you can write me up or you can fire me, but you're not going to yell at me. I'm not your 15-year-old kid. I'm an adult, and you're going to talk to me like I'm an adult. So I'm going to come in your office when I get back to work, and I'll sit down, and we can talk about the problem. You can tell me how wrong it is, and you can tell me what we need to do to fix it, and all those things. And if you need to write me up, cool. But if you raise your voice, I'm going to stand up and walk out of your office. And then when you've cooled back down, I'll come back and we can continue. But I will not sit in your office and be yelled at like I'm a child. It's not a threat. It's me communicating that I respect myself and I demand that if I'm going to be in a relationship with you, even if I'm submitted to you, that you're also going to respect me. You're going to treat me like someone of value. So one last example. This is a hypothetical. If someone were to violate your trust, so how do you do this in real life? So you might say something like, when you shared that thing that I shared with you in confidence, it made me feel like I can't trust you anymore. If we're going to be best friends, I need to be able to trust you. Are you willing to do that? What you've done is communicated, what you did really hurt me. And I'm not going to be in a relationship where I get hurt like that. And so I need you to adjust your behavior. And then you've given them the power to make the decision. Are they willing to respect you enough to adjust their behavior to not hurt you again, or are they not? If they answer yes, that's a powerful person's response. They take responsibility for their actions. I'm so sorry, you're right. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't think it was that big of a deal. It'll never happen again. I'll do my best. I won't. That was never my intention to hurt you. If they can't, boundary time. If I can't trust you, then I'm not going to be able to share things in confidence anymore. Sorry. We can still be friends, but we're not going to be as close as we were. That communicates that I value you, but in order to protect our connection, in order to protect our friendship, I can't let you come to a level that you're not equipped to operate at. So, number one, we determine our priorities in relationship. God, your spouse, kids, close friends, your other friends, everyone else. Number two, learn to respect yourself and those you interact with. Decide ahead of time where, when, and how you're willing to invest your time, energy, attention, and other resources. And set appropriate limits and boundaries with people who need them. Protect the connections that are most important. Respect yourself and everyone that you interact with. And say what you mean and do it. I want you to bow your heads and close your eyes. Like we do every week, I want you to ask the Holy Spirit, what are you saying to me through this message? Maybe there are some people in your life that you need to have some hard conversations with. Maybe it's with yourself. Maybe you've never had the level of self-respect to think that you're worth drawing boundaries around yourself. And just like anything else we do with the Lord, the way to move forward is to just repent. That means to change the way we think about something. Metanoia in Greek. Think differently. And so I want to leave you with something, and I'll provide this on Slack if everybody wants it. But this is the keep your love on declaration. These are the statements about what I am and who I am and who I'm going to be in relationship. So I just want to pray this over us, and then we're done. So, I know the spirit of power and love are at work in me. I can love at all times through Christ who strengthens me. I am courageous with my love. I am powerful to control myself no matter what others choose to believe or do. My goal is connection, not distance. I will tell others about me and let them tell me about them. I matter, and so do you. I clearly and honestly express what I'm feeling and what I need to feel. I listen well to what others are feeling and what they need to feel. I communicate my value and priorities by expecting respect. I show respect by listening well and honoring the boundaries of others. I keep my love on and chase fear out of my most vital relationships. Lord, this morning, that's who we want to be. We want to be powerful people who operate in self-control. God, help us know where we need to set boundaries. God, help us know that we need to set boundaries. Help us see the value in us, God, that you formed us in our mother's womb and that you get to define who we are and how valuable we are. God, that we're so valuable that you paid for us with the blood of your Son. And so, God, if that's the value that you see in us, God, help us see the same value in ourselves. God, help us bring love and power into our relationships. God, help us learn to adjust when we need to adjust and have the humility to be willing to be confronted when we need to adjust. And God, help us keep our love on no matter what. In Jesus' name, everybody said, amen.